So just a quick overview for what we're going to be talking about throughout this presentation. We're going to be talking about what is human trafficking, what are the different methods of human trafficking, what's the world's attempts to stop it, which is also the tier system, what are some signs to look for, and I'm also going to share 3 stories of survivors. So this entire semester we have been talking about what is human trafficking. Human trafficking is a crime involving the exploitation of someone for the purposes of compelled labor or commercial sex act through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. So for the main methods we're going to be talking about are force, fraud, and coercion, which are what were in the definition. So force would be abduction or threats, and with the threats, a lot of the times, not only will they threaten the victim, but they will also threaten the victim's family and tell them that if they don't do what they want, they're going to kill their entire family. Fraud would be job offers or a promise of a better life. So they'll find these women and they pick women from vulnerable populations and they tell them, well, if you come with me, I can get you this amazing job and you can make so much money and you can build up so much stuff and your life will just be better. For coercion, I want to talk about the lover boy tactic, which is when a man or woman will act like they are in love with someone and they will treat them the best, they'll be the best person to them, and eventually they will talk them into moving. Now they might move to a different city or a different state, but as soon as they get to the new place that they're going, the person will do a complete turnaround with their actions and they'll start treating the person poorly and they eventually will force them into prostitution. So that is a tactic. So now we're going to hop over to other methods, and one of those is being sold into trafficking, and that's either by a family member, husband, boyfriend, someone of that nature. Abuse of religious beliefs. In one of the articles I had read, there was a specific story, and I believe it took place in Nigeria, and they said that they would have this big ceremony, and there would be like a high priest type of a thing, and he would take like fingernail clippings or take hair from the women, and they would have this big ceremony, and with the women offering their fingernails and their hair, they're basically taking an oath to being trafficked, and part of the oath is that they will not run away, they will not fight, and they will do whatever they are told to do. Another big thing, especially nowadays, is the use of social media with trafficking. A lot of the times, people will pose as young children. So they'll pose like they're 14 years old, maybe a little older, maybe a little younger, and they will talk to these young girls or young boys, and they will tell them to come meet up with me. They'll talk to them, they'll be sweet, and they'll talk them into sneaking out and going to meet them. And then whenever they get there, it's not the person that they thought they were talking to, and they can be abducted, and they can be taken, and it's trafficking. Another is they target foster homes, and it's because they're a very vulnerable population when they're leaving the foster home. They are leaving and they really don't have any fallback, they don't have any money, they don't have a place to go most of the time when these children are leaving, and this makes them a great target for traffickers because they will offer them a job and everything like that, and the people will get abducted. Now really quick, the main reason I wanted to do this presentation was because I wanted to know more about the methods, because you hear a lot on like Facebook and social media about like zip ties being put onto people's windshield wipers, or there's been like fake accidents where people are laying in the road like they've been hurt, and I wanted to know more about that. And throughout my research, and I looked at a bunch of different states, a bunch of different counties, and a lot of the police reports said that this was fake. This was just a scare tactic going around on Facebook, and all of them said that there were no reports that they had in their system about anything like that. There are reports, though, of women being followed through malls and followed out to their cars and things like that. So trafficking is moving closer and closer to us. So the world tier system, which is the government's stance on trying to limit the trafficking, there are technically 4 different tier levels. We're going to say there's 3 main ones. So tier 1 are countries whose governments fully comply with the TVPA minimum standards, so the Trafficked Victims Protection Act standards. Tier 2 are countries whose governments do not fully comply with their standards, but they're making really big efforts to try to bring themselves into compliance. And then you have Tier 2 watch list, which is basically the same as Tier 2, but on the watch list, they are not making any significant change, and the trafficking is continuing to significantly increase. And they're not making any efforts at all to combat the trafficking. And then there's Tier 3. Tier 3 is the worst. It's countries whose governments do not fully comply with the standards, and they're also not making any efforts to do so. They really don't care about it. And in my research, I found that there are the top 5 Tier 3 countries, and they are Russia, China, Iran, I believe it's pronounced Belarus, and then also Venezuela. So those are the top 3 countries in the world that are Tier 3, and they are the worst of the Tier 3 as well. Trafficking is very, very intense in those countries, and they aren't really doing anything at all to combat it. So I feel as social workers, it is very, very important for us to know what signs to look for, and not necessarily just social workers, but anyone in the field that will be dealing with trafficking victims. So I feel that it's important to add this in. So a lot of times, trafficking victims will be fearful of the police or of the authorities. They'll be fearful of the trafficker, and it's because the trafficker has threatened their lives and also has threatened the lives of their family. They exhibit signs of physical and psychological trauma. They're fearful of telling others about their situation. They have limited freedom of movement, so they're not really able to do anything on their own. They will be unpaid or paid very, very little. They have limited access to medical care. And quick note on this one, even when they do have the access to the medical care, the trafficker will be in the room with them. And a lot of the times the trafficker will answer all of the questions, not giving the victim a chance to say anything in case they were to say something wrong. And that is a very big red flag to look out for when dealing with populations like this. They seem to be in debt to someone. They have no passport or mention that someone else is holding their passport. And they are regularly moved to avoid detection, so they hop from place to place to place so that they aren't raided. So moving on from there, I'm going to talk to you about 3 different survivors. This is survivor number 1. This is Louisa. She left home in Uzbekistan at the age of 22 to go to Osh. While she was there, she had a very difficult time getting a job due to her ID because she did not have a student ID, and she also did not have an Osh ID, so she had a really hard time finding anything. And she met a lady who promised her a great job, and in the article she had mentioned that she knew something was wrong because once she met up at this apartment that the lady told her to meet up at, they were all told to give the people their passports, and they were going to have their pictures taken and be issued new fake passports. She ended up in a nightclub, and there she was told she had to earn $10,000 by the end of that month, and she ended up working there for 18 months. She left the club one night and saw a police car, and she said normally she saw a police car, she would just go the other way. But this night, she decided she had had enough, and she let herself actually get arrested. Now, this is the part that's kind of sad about her story. Due to the traffickers giving her the fake passport, she had to spend a year in jail in Osh for it, even though the traffickers made it. But while she was there, she did file a report, and 3 traffickers were arrested from that. So now we're going to move on to survivor number 2, which is going to be Mary. When she was 17, she left her home in Nigeria to find work. She was put in contact with a man, and he promised to pay her way and put her into some kind of restaurant work, which she was very excited for because with where she had come from, they didn't have very many options for anything. She ended up getting moved to like an apartment type place. It was with a small group of boys and girls, and on her very first night there is when she was subjected to her first rape. After this, they were taken on a boat to Italy, and they were told they were going to be staying in this village, and that's where they were then told they were going to be sex workers. And those who paid her way were demanding money and were also threatening her mother because she was refusing to work. She said, "I'm not doing it, I'm not selling my body." And so in that case, they decided that they were going to threaten her mother and not just her. While the time that this article was published in 2019 of July, she was waiting for her documents to process so she could leave and go home. And she also said that she wanted to end up becoming a lawyer and that she wanted to help people that had been trafficked and she wanted to be an advocate for them. And our last story is going to be survivor number 3. She was 24 from Kachin, which is a very impoverished village. A woman from her village offered her a factory job in China, and she quickly took it because they had no options as well. Once she arrived to China, she found out that she was going to a place to be used for baby birth trafficking. They would be drugged, and then they would have sperm placed inside of them, and they were having babies for Chinese men. They were paying this company. If they fought it and fought the injection or tried to fight the men, they would be beaten severely. And one day she had someone on the inside that she trusted enough, and she gave them a note, and they gave it to her family. And within doing this, the trafficking broker was arrested, but they refused to disclose her location. So her family had to round up and talk to all the villagers, or all of the people in the village, and they were all able to come up with enough money to pay her ransom for her to return home. And once she returned home, she shared the names of other women that she had met and was able to get them rescued as well. So not only was her bravery rewarded with her own safety, but also the safety of other women. And then these are my references. And I want to thank you guys so much for listening.